It was an enormous shock to learn that Charlie had been killed. The fact is that he was such an enormous figure, had so much energy, was so totally committed to freedom and to helping America find its way back, and was so courageous in going into campuses and neighborhoods, talking to people who he knew were the other side, but doing it deliberately to create a common dialogue and a common sense of, as Americans, we can solve this. I'd known Charlie Kirk for a long time, and I'd admired him. We'd done a number of things together. We had a very emotional podcast together at the Republican convention just a few days after President Trump had been shot. And the sense we had then of how dangerous politics had become and how tragic it was that some Americans wanted to take violence into their own hands in a way that we found shocking. And, you can imagine now, a little over a year later, to have Charlie himself, the victim of an assassination, is just so stunning. When Callista first called and told me about it, I had been in a meeting, and it was like you couldn't quite believe it. Partly because he's so vibrant, and with his family, with Erica and his 3-year-old daughter and his 1-year-old son, they were such a classic example of pursuing happiness, leading a wholesome life, doing the right things. And then boom, he's dead. And I thought that when President Trump announced it and explained from his standpoint what Charlie had meant to him, it began to have this sense of what a remarkable person this was, starting as a teenager in Chicago, deciding that his role in life was to be a public civic leader, not to run for office, and not to acquire huge amounts of money, but to go out and organize and network. And with Turning Point, he had built a system where there were literally millions of people who were responsive to him. I would routinely do his podcasts and talk with him about various issues. The scale of his reach was remarkable. He truly was becoming, for his generation, what Rush Limbaugh had been for many, many years for the whole country. And you could see him growing. And you realize that probably the most important, at 31 years of age, probably the most important conservative leader in the country, in his vision, in his positiveness, frankly, in his happiness, kind of conservatism you'd like, which was oriented towards a better future, towards what Trump has called a golden age. I think that we all have to take seriously how deeply violent the country has become, how much of it is political, but also how much of it is some psychosis, whether it's from drugs, from the internet, from the collapse of the family. There is a kind of evil in the world. The killing of children in Colorado just hours before Charlie himself was killed. The killing of the young Ukrainian refugee in Charlotte in what is one of the most brutal 4 minutes of video I've ever seen, in which nobody on the entire train car, nobody comes to help her. And she's killed for no reason. And the man himself has admitted that he's insane. And yet there he was. The 2 young children, 8 and 10 years old, who were killed in Minnesota while praying at Mass. And another 31 were wounded by somebody who the U.S. attorney said seems to hate everybody. So we're faced with exactly the intersection that Charlie wanted to help us avoid. He believed it was possible to create civility. It was possible to have debates. It was possible to talk with each other. And you could do so without violence and, frankly, without much hostility. If you look at what he did and how he did it, he said he was cheerful about arguing, but he argued from the facts much more than from emotion. And I think he felt that he was truly helping create a better future. I'd gone to some of his events, and they're amazing. He would rally thousands and thousands of people who were cheerful and excited and enthusiastic. It was sort of the beginning of the next generation of a governing conservatism, building on what Trump had achieved, but building on it with a whole new generation of people, a whole new set of ideas, and with a very positive, joyful approach. So if somebody of that caliber and that spirit cut down at 31 years of age was sobering. The only thing I could compare it to was when I was a graduate student, and a friend of mine who was the only African-American student in our graduate class at Tulane called me and said that Martin Luther King Jr. had just been assassinated. And that sense of despair, that sense of loss. And so that came back to me once again, that we had lost someone worthy of a long life. We'd lost somebody who had done everything right and who was trying to be a great citizen, a great husband, a great father, and a good friend. And I think that it's really important to recognize that this is a very sad moment for America, and that each of us, in our own way, should take up the cause that Charlie worked for, lived for, and ultimately died for, and that together we should be committed that this country will, in fact, go forward in freedom, that it will, in fact, go forward in Lincoln's formula of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that Charlie's life will not have been in vain, but in fact, he will be one of the martyrs who creates the framework within which a better America, a more peaceful America, a more optimistic America can emerge. And we owe him that, and we should dedicate ourselves to that future in his name.